All right, guys. So I want to start to think about what story this particular graph is telling. Now, there's a couple things we need to look at first. Remembering that on the x-axis or the horizontal axis, we're looking at the months during the school year, and the reason we're only going from August to April is because those are the only months that we've gone through so far. And then on the y-axis, which is over here, that's our vertical axis, we're measuring the average time spent watching Netflix per day. And this is when it says the average time, this is in, I don't think I wrote this on the chart, but this is in hours. This is measured in hours. Now, as we look through this, the first thing I notice, and I think probably the first thing that anybody is going to notice when we're looking at this graph, the part that probably jumps out to you is right here, because you notice we see this steep increase between the months of February to the months of March. So February looks about the same as every month before it. So August, September, October, November, December, January, February, they're a little bit different, but they all look about the same. But then we get here to March, and something obviously changes. And then we get to April, and it changes even more. So we've got to start to think in our mind. Let's think about this year. What might have changed from February to then March and April? Because we see this steep increase between the months of February and March, is where we see this giant increase. Now, we also see a little increase between March and April as well, but nothing like this big increase from February to March. So think about what might have happened. What story is there behind that? Why might I be watching Netflix more now than I did before? Now, the other thing I want to talk about is looking at every month from August to February, you're going to notice they all look about the same. If we look at our points here, you'll notice that these first 4 points are actually the same value. And they're all going to be between 0 and 5. And you'll notice they're definitely much closer to 0 than they are to 5. So I'm going to say these all are 1. Now, what that means is that for each of those 4 months, I averaged watching 1 hour of Netflix per day for each day during that month was my average. You'll notice when we go to December and January, you'll notice it goes up a little bit. We see a small increase as that graph goes up. It's a little bit more. We'll say these are 2. So each of those are 2. And even into February here, it looks like that is 2 as well. So we have this tiny little increase as we go from November to December, January, and February. Now, I can't say for certain, um, but most likely, the reason that my Netflix viewership went up, if I'm thinking about what story is this telling, it got cold outside. When it gets cold outside, we tend to be inside more. Therefore, we're watching more TV. Maybe we're inside more, so we have it on more versus when it's nice out, we go outside a lot. So that may be the story that tells. But then we get this giant increase, and that's going to tell a story as well. Now, when we get to this point up here in March, you're gonna notice that it's actually above. It's between your 10 and 15 hours, which is ridiculous. 10 and 15 hours, and it looks like this one is just above 10. I'm gonna say 11. Um, and this top one is between 10 and 15, closer to 15, about 13. 13 hours a day, which is ridiculous. So on this chart, we have all the months. So we have August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April. We have 9 pieces of data. And my 9 pieces of data, I'll circle them just so we can remember, are 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 11, 13. Now, what I want you to think about is, could I then take this data and organize it into a stem and leaf chart? Remembering that anytime we have a single digit value, that our stem is always going to be 0. So most of the stems here are actually going to be 0 for most of these numbers, because most are single digit numbers, and the only other ones are going to be double digit. They all have a leaf of 1. because we don't have anything in the 20s or above. So the first thing I want you to do is try to take this data and change it into a stem and leaf chart. The second thing I want you to think about is, could we take this data and find the mean, the median, the mode, and the range? The mean, the median, the mode, and the range of this data that we see here. Looking at it's going to help us to interpret what is happening. Now, lastly, I do want to point out that throughout this whole portion of the graph, things aren't changing much. My range there is really small because I only went from 1 to 2, so my range is just an hour difference. That's pretty small. Notice though here makes my range go way up. Remember thinking about outliers. 11 and 13 are outliers, and we got to think about, why is that affecting our data? How is that affecting our data? And what is happening here? Remember, every graph tells a story. We have to figure out what story this one is telling. Give that a shot.